the folks in Boulder are feeling pretty good after what happened on Saturday when they came to TCU and took out your Horned Frogs. Before we get to the actual game itself, just the overall perspective on what this team in Colorado and Deion Sanders and what they accomplished, given everything we talked about with them coming into this upcoming season so far.
Why are you doing this, man?
We gotta get it out the way. You gotta get it out the way.
Actually, can I let me simplify this down a little bit, because one thing that I've been looking at is obviously like all of the new faces, managing to get all those guys on the same page and only having one or two procedural penalties throughout this. Like, that's fantastic. And I feel like coming into this, and KG can attest, I personally was trying to like lower expectations because, we've been in this college football space. Year one is a tough proposition, a whole bunch of new faces. I was like, hey man, stop. Don't do the whole thing where we put them into a bowl game. Was I hating, Joel? Was I hating, or like, was that fair?
I think that it's reasonable to look at what Deion was doing and say, I've never seen anybody do this before. And I mean, notably, the offensive and defensive lines were really weak. Like, they just replaced bad players with players that nobody had heard of, basically. And so, it made sense for everybody to look at that and say, I don't see how that could possibly be successful. And so, I mean, Deion did everything he said he was going to do, man. And, so you asked me how I felt about this, right? I think that 45-42 Colorado over TCU is one of the most consequential outcomes in college football, probably. I think it's going to be an existential inflection point for that program that, I mean, obviously they could go 1-11 from here and we could all end up sounding stupid, but I don't think, given what we saw on Saturday, that's going to happen. Like, they looked well coached. They looked dynamic in certain spots. And they looked resilient. Like, I mean, they took a punch from a team that was in the national championship game. Like, I thought TCU had, sort of righted things in the fourth quarter, and then they came right back down the field and scored on them. So, I mean, it's hard to look at what we saw and think that nobody other than people inside that locker room thought that it was going to go down like that, right? Like, if they had stayed close and lost, then, that's sort of within the range of possibilities. But winning on the road against a team that was in the national championship game last year, I don't think. That's not hating. That's just, we never saw that before. So congratulations to you, Coach Sanders, for pulling that off.
Okay, we will table the Coach Sanders just for a little bit, because we want to talk about your alma mater, TCU. Your man's, Sonny Dykes. Because this is the thing, people have talked about TCU as they were just in the national championship game. Right. I'm not even going to talk about that. I want you to acknowledge I'm not even going to do that to you. But
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. But like,
it's bad enough. You remember how bad it was.
You know that I'm hiding my hand a little bit, because on the other side I'm going to talk about your man's went and got Kendall Briles to be the offensive coordinator.
Come on, man. Why are you doing that?
No, because this is the thing. It needs to be answered for. It needs to be talked about. Like, and then also, the defense did not look, especially in the secondary, they were able to get danced upon by Colorado. Like, what were your impressions as a dude who was starting to buy in to the Sonny Dykes experience at TCU to, week one, have that happen?
I'm going to quibble with you saying that I was buying into the Sonny Dykes.
Oh, no, we got the records, man. Don't make us go get the tape, man.
I think we got that on tape now.
Get the tape. Get the tape. Here's the thing about last year. It was maybe in mid-November when I was like, okay, I will admit that he was doing a good job. I did not say that he was the man for the job, but I'm somebody that is willing to say, you know what? All things considered, first-year coach, taking over the situation he did a great job. But if anybody follows me or remembers me on this radio station last year, the ongoing thing with me was that I did not believe in Sonny Dykes. I saw what he did at SMU. He's got one conference championship in like 13 years as a head coach, and he'd done so well starting off pretty much every year, everywhere he'd been. Louisiana Tech, SMU. You don't talk about Cal, right? Because that's Cal's fault. Cal wasn't good, according to him. You couldn't win out there. So, okay, well, I'll let that off the record. But I never had a lot of faith in him. If you go back and look at last season, I'm not looking at a lot of games where they, like, impose their will over a lot of teams. Like, they beat Tarleton State. But every game was pretty much nip and tuck with the exception of the Iowa State game down the stretch. And they caught a lot of breaks, man. They were more like a 9-3 team than a 12-0 team by the time the postseason came around. So It's just the reason. They're not going to get all those breaks the next year. They were bad on defense, and they're losing all these guys that Coach P, Gary Patterson, had recruited and developed. Max Duggan, Quentin Johnston, Kendre Miller, all those other dudes. So now he's got to rebuild with his team, his offense. He brings in Kendall Browse for whatever the hell reason. I was not a person that was on board with that. For not just because I don't think he's as good of an offensive coordinator as his name suggests, but because of the stuff that went down at Baylor. We don't have to get into that. But I'm just saying, I never totally bought in, and this is what I mean. Are y'all going to tell people? Y'all been reading my tweets. Y'all remember that I was the person that said in November 2021, why aren't y'all hiring Deion TCU? Why not give that brother a shot? You're going to replace Gary Patterson, the best coach in TCU history since desegregation? Like, you need to think big. You need to think, oh, wow, let's try something different. We need to stay relevant. The landscape of college football is changing. What's one way to get attention? What's one way to stay relevant? Even if it doesn't work out, you can move on past it. But, I mean, we missed that opportunity, and now – I'm not saying Sonny Dykes is a bad coach. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but I'm looking at his record. I never thought he was a dude that was going to be the person that was going to take us into, competing on a real national level. And I mean, playing a national championship game is something, but like where people believe, oh, they can go toe-to-toe with Texas for real, or Florida State for real, or LSU for real. Nobody thought that. Nobody thinks that. And nobody's going to think that.
We are talking to the president of the Get Away With It All-Stars, Joel Anderson, right here on the Get Right with Reggie KG here on 105 through the Fan. I mean, obviously, that was the big story of the college football season. But I do want to ask you this with respect to what that win, you talked about it a little bit in terms of what that win represented for Deion and the program. For college football as a whole and some of the conversation that has surrounded the game since then, what have you made of some of that commentary in terms of how the program has been shaped and reshaped under Deion and what that means for the larger scope of what college football could be if this remains successful for Deion and the Colorado Buffaloes in this case?
I think that there's only one thing that other schools can probably take from what Deion and Colorado have done, which is you saw them turn over the roster in an unprecedented way. They had some 80-plus different players this year. Only 10 of the guys that were on the team last year on the team this year. And the way that I know that this might catch on is because all we got to do is go down the street and see what else happened in Texas this weekend. I ain't seen nobody talk about Baylor and what Texas State did to them. Texas State, the other program in the state, they accepted the second most number of transfers out of the portal and went down there and beat up on Baylor. So I think that is something that other coaches are going to get more serious about. They were already looking into the transfer portal, but they may become a little bit more bloodless about how they flip over the rosters because they say, hey, look, I can – a lot of athletic directors are going to be like, why is it taking you 3 years? Why don't you bring in some players to shore up that spot? But if anybody is hoping that they can do what Colorado did, I mean, you're fooling yourself. There's one Deion Sanders. You can't just hire somebody and build that sort of like energy and attention and the charisma that Deion has. There's nobody like him, even if you don't like him. And I'm a little, I've got my questions about the dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to sit up here and say that I'm the biggest Deion Sanders fan. But, I mean, it was clear that he is unlike anybody else. And if you're a 17-year-old four-star recruit in the DFW area right now, like let's say you live in Red Oak or, Grand Prairie, and you're thinking about where you want to go spend the next 4 years, I mean, and you've got Colorado and TCU on deck, if Deion comes into your house or Sonny Dykes come into your house, which picture you think you're going to tweet out to your followers, right? Who do you think you're going to be most excited about? And that's the sort of stuff that I'm thinking about. That's the sort of stuff that no other program can do. I mean, that's not even Sonny Dykes' fault. I mean, you could say the same thing about Dave Aranda or whoever, Joey McGuire. Like, I mean, they're not going to be able to build the sort of energy that Deion built. So, I mean, maybe one way that it'll shift is that somebody else might hire him. Maybe the University of Florida may look at what Billy Napier's doing and be like, we could do a little bit better than that, right? But it's just, there's one of one. You can't hire Ed Reed or Eddie George or Trent Dilfer and expect the same results as what Deion did in Colorado because there's only one Deion, bro. I mean, we know Deion, for a almost 60-something-year-old guy, like, he's got real swag, not borrowed swag like a lot of these other coaches.
And I think that's so interesting. Like, that uniqueness about Deion is seems to be why at least some portions of the college football industry itself seem to dislike him, is because he does not fit into like the cultural norm of college football. And speaking to like this newfangled, lean into portaling as a development tool, let's go to the opposite and see who people hate in that realm. How much joy did you derive from Clemson and Dabo Swinney falling on their face against Duke?
I mean, bro, I was happy for Duke, even though it's kind of weird. I mean, I'm not really social like Duke like that. I mean, I grew up rooting for UNLV or whatever, but I was really happy for Duke. But for Clemson, I mean, they look sad more than anything. I don't know. Did you all take a lot of joy in it? Because I looked at Clemson and I was like, oh, y'all kind of look pathetic. Like you can't get out of your own. They did move the ball a little bit, but they turned it over a couple of times. The defense, I mean, to get outran by a dude from Duke, I mean, Clemson, it just tells you about the erosion of talent and, dynamic athletic talent there. So, I'm not the biggest Dabo Swinney fan. And, I didn't take a lot of joy in it. I just looked at them and said, man, y'all look pathetic, bro. Y'all, and I'm sure that they'll probably go 9-3 and they'll do okay. Like they probably will recover. But to me, it looked like, do you know when Stanford had Jim Harbaugh and they beat Pete Carroll, they were like a 50-point underdog or something like that, and won. It was like, this seems kind of like the end. Like Miami lost a couple games like that too in like the early 2000s, where it was like, ooh, they shouldn't have lost to that team. It's probably over. And I kind of felt like, oh, we just saw the end of the Dabo Clemson era. Like their days being a national championship contender are probably over, especially if he ain't gonna do the portal. I mean, that's just cutting off your nose to spite your face, bro. Like, I mean, it's too important to not use. And I assume that the board of trustees and his athletic director, if Dabo won't listen to them soon enough, then he probably won't be there for that much longer.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the reason why I took joy is like in an industry full of folks that are willing to kind of like grandstand and kind of be a little smarmy. It felt like two sides of one coin. Like Deion has a little bit of that to him, but it seems like he does that with a genuine love for the players and wanting to get them to a certain place. Dabo seems to be the other side of that coin, and I won't actually say the words.
I'll give you that. I think Dabo does love his players to the extent that coaches love their players. But like you said, yeah, I mean, it's just a little, I mean, I just go back to some of his covers during 2020, which is actually just borderline ridiculous and bordering on something else. And, yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to take pleasure in his downfall, I would definitely not stop you, because that is not somebody I'm going to line up on the sideline and ride with, for sure.
So what bowl game are we thinking for TCU, Joel? We thinking what, Alamo Bowl? Where are we looking?
What you doing? I mean, come on, man.
The Get Away With It Bowl, I'm sure somewhere to be found.
I'm looking at the schedule, and I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm a TCU, alum for real. I'm a booster, man. I give money back to the school sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
You might want to take some of that back after this weekend.
Well, I mean, I'd be like, I don't have enough money to be like, see, I should have hired Deion. But I'm looking, I don't think they're going to be Texas or Oklahoma. I don't think that they'll be Kansas State. So what, that's 4 losses right there. And then who knows what Oklahoma State's going to do. Kansas is better this year. Texas Tech is supposed to be better this year, even though they lost to Wyoming. So, I don't know, man. What happens when you lose 5 games? I don't even know all the bowls anymore. I think that the Alamo Bowl might be too good. To be honest.
Wow.
I'm trying to be realistic. Like, that's the thing people get upset when they say, you don't support your alma mater and all this other stuff. I'm like, no, I'm trying to be a realistic fan. Like, I'm looking at the product out there, and I'm looking at the amount of talent we lost, and I'm looking at the coaching staff. That defense, that 3-3-5, bruh. Take that back to Tulsa. You know what I'm saying? Take that back to Tulsa. So, I just, if they go 7-5, I just have to live with it, man. I know y'all will probably call me back and try to clown me and everything else, but look, I've already accepted it. You can't get to me, brother, because we were at the mountaintop last year, and if this year is just a rebuilding year and we embarrass ourselves in the first game of the year, then I just got to deal with it.
Well, this is just how we show love, Joel.
That's right. We love you. We love you.
I appreciate it. And that's why I came on. I didn't mean to hate on the Rangers. Man, I covered some games.
Yes, you did.
Back in the day.
Yes, you did. Yes, you
Look,
did.
man, I enjoyed Dallas, man. Y'all have some nice stuff up there. I don't want to be at odds with Dallas. I might want to live there again someday.